Oh no, I'm live. Hi. Hi. That's my Wolverine mask. My name is Jimmy. Thank you for joining us at Big Boys Like Storytime with Grey Dog and J Dog. I'm J Dog. I don't know if the chat's not working. Oh no. Well, I guess I can't hear any of your guys' opinions on my reading. It says unable to connect the chat on my end. I don't know if that's I'm gonna pop out this chat here, see if that does anything. This is usually the part where I just kind of stall until some people show up. All right, there are three people here. Hi, everybody. So, this is a thing that I started a few weeks ago where I would read to my son via some sort of video service. We read my novel. Well, these are all mine, but we read the one that I wrote. And now we are reading the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Shadow over Innsmouth. If you're just joining us, last week our narrator seems like a nice guy, real down to earth fella, real solid earth guy. He's taking something of a tour of New England, looking at old buildings and shit like that. And he hears about this town, Innsmouth, it's in Rhode Island, New England. It's all the same. It's all the same to me. I've never left the Southwest United States. That's not entirely true. Yeah. So he hears about this town, Innsmouth, that's full of a lot of weirdos and strange goings on and queer things. There's a lot of queer things in this story. And then he makes the pilgrimage into Innsmouth despite all previous warnings. Check out the stuff, and it's even creepier than he'd been told. And he does find there's one guy that works at the grocery store who's not from there, who kind of fills him in on the town. And he says there's a local fella who is not from here originally, but he's really old. He's like 92. And if you get him drunk, he'll tell you whatever you want. So I think that's right about where we left off. We were just about to meet that nice guy. And the voice I will be doing for him is what I remember of Robert Shaw's accent from Jaws, I should remember most of it. It has been a couple of years, but I've also seen that movie 700 times. All right, good. We already lost somebody. I don't know if you guys are trying to chat. You can chat amongst yourselves. Frankly, that's my least favorite thing about this. So my roommate's throwing a surprise party for her dog. All right, so fuck it. I guess we'll do it. Unfortunately, I only have time to read one chapter because I missed like 4 or 5 days of work because my tummy hurt and I couldn't poop. I'm 42. Actually, 42 is exactly the age where that's supposed to happen, I guess. It's been the worst few days of my life, though, I can tell you that. And I've had some pretty bad days. No, I'm not going to go into detail. Suffice it to say, it was as painful as it was disgusting. So, because of that, now I'm way behind on a bunch of other things. So I got to get back to that. I am feeling better. Thank you for asking. And I have been catching up okay so far. So, all right. What do you say? Chapter 3. I got to find my page. Chapter 3 of The Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. Chapter 3. It must have been some imp of the perverse, or some sardonic pull from dark hidden sources, which made me change my plans as I did. I had long before resolved to limit my observations to architecture alone, and I was even then hurrying toward the square in an effort to get quick transportation out of this festering city of death and decay. But the sight of old Zadok Allen set up new currents in my mind and made me slacken my pace uncertainly. Zadok Allen is the old guy. I think it's pronounced Zadok. I don't know. That's how every Zadok I've ever met pronounced. I had been assured that the old man could do nothing but hint at wild, disjointed, and incredible legends, and I had been warned that the natives made it unsafe to be seen talking with him. Yet the thought of this aged witness to this town's decay, with memories going back to the early days of ships and factories, was a lure that no amount of reason could make me resist. After all, the strangest and maddest of myths are often merely symbols or allegories based upon truth. And old Zadok, must have seen everything which went on around Innsmouth for the last 90 years. Curiosity flared up beyond sense and caution, and in my youthful egotism, I fancied I might be able to sift a nucleus of real history from the confused, extravagant outpouring I would probably extract with the aid of raw whiskey. I knew that I could not accost him then and there, for the firemen would surely notice and object. Instead, I reflected, I would prepare by getting some bootleg liquor at a place where the grocery boy had told me it was plentiful. Then I would loaf near the fire station in apparent casualness, and fall in with old Zadok after he had started on one of his frequent rambles. The youth said that he was very restless, seldom sitting around the station for more than an hour or two at a time. A quart bottle of whiskey was easily, though not cheaply, obtained in the rear of a dingy variety store just off the square in Elliott Street. The dirty-looking fellow who waited on me had a touch of the staring Innsmouth look, but was quite civil in his way, being perhaps used to the custom of such convivial strangers, truckmen, gold buyers, and the like, as were occasionally in town. Re-entering the square, I saw that luck was with me, for shuffling out of Payne Street around the corner of the Gilman house, I glimpsed nothing less than the tall, lean, tattered form of old Zadok Allen himself. In accordance with my plan, I attracted his attention by brandishing my newly purchased bottle, and soon realized that he had begun to shuffle wistfully after me as I turned into Waite Street on my way to the most deserted region I could think of. I laughed a little because I pictured Zadok Allen go, this is not a comedy, goddammit. That's what people say at my shows. I was steering my course by the map the grocery boy had prepared, and was aiming for the wholly abandoned stretch of southern waterfront which I had previously visited. The only people in sight there had been the fishermen on the distant breakwater, and by going a few squares south I could get beyond the range of these, finding a pair of seats on some abandoned wharf, and being free to question old Zadok unobserved for an indefinite time. Before I reached Main Street, I could hear a faint and wheezy, "Hey, mister," behind me, and I presently allowed the old man to catch up and take copious pulls from the quart bottle. I began putting out feelers as we walked along the Water Street and turned southward amidst the omnipresent desolation and crazily tilted ruins, but found that the aged tongue did not loosen as quickly as I had expected. At length I saw a grass-grown opening toward the sea between crumbling brick walls, with the weedy length of an earth and masonry wharf projecting beyond. Piles of moss-covered stones near the water promised tolerable seats, and the scene was sheltered from all possible view by a ruined warehouse on the north. Here, I thought, was the ideal place for a long, secret colloquy. I think that's how you pronounce that. So I guided my companion down the lane and picked out spots to sit in among the mossy stones. The air of death and desertion was ghoulish, and the smell of fish almost insufferable, but I was resolved to let nothing deter me. Oh, what a brave man. About 4 hours remained for conversation if I were to catch the 8 o'clock coach for Arkham, and I began to dole out more liquor to the ancient tippler, meanwhile eating my own frugal lunch. In my donations, I was careful not to overshoot the mark, for I did not wish Zadok's vinous garrulousness to pass into a stupor. After an hour, his furtive taciturnity showed signs of disappearing, but much to my disappointment, he still sidetracked my questions about Innsmouth and its shadow-haunted past. He would babble of current topics, revealing a wide acquaintance with newspapers and a great tendency to philosophize in a sententious village fashion. Toward the end of the second hour, I feared my quart of whiskey would not be enough to produce results, and was wondering whether I had better leave old Zadok and go back for more. Just then, however, chance made the opening which my questions had been unable to make, and the wheezing ancient's rambling took a turn that caused me to lean forward and listen alertly. My back was toward the fishy-smelling sea, but he was facing it, and something or other had caused his wandering gaze to light on the low, distant line of Devil Reef, then showing plainly and almost fascinatingly above the waves. The sight seemed to displease him, for he began a series of weak curses, which ended in a confidential whisper and a knowing leer. He bent toward me, took hold of my coat lapel, and hissed out some hints that could not be mistaken. There's where it all begun, that cursed place of all wickedness where the deep water starts. Gates of hell, sheer drop down to a bottom no sounding line can touch. Old Captain Obed done it. Him that found out more than was good for him in the South Sea Islands. That's actually pretty good, Robert Shaw. Thank you. Everybody fucked it up. Everybody was in a bad way them days. Trade falling off, mills losing business, even the new ones. And the best of our men folks killed a privateering in the War of 1812 or lost with the Eliza brig and the Ranger Snow, both of them Gilman ventures. Obed Marsh, he had 3 ships afloat, Brigantine Columbia, Brig Hetty, and Bark Sumatra Queen. He was the only one who's kept on with the East Indian and Pacific trade, though Esdras Martin's Barkentine Malay Prade made a venture as late as 28. Never was nobody like Captain Obed. Old Lima Satan. I can mind him telling about the furrin parts and calling all the folks stupid for going to the Christian meeting and bearing their burdens meek and lowly. Says they ought to get better gods like some of the folks in the Ingies, gods as would bring them good fishing in return for their sacrifices and would really answer folks' prayers. Matt Elliott, his first mate, talked a lot too, only he was again folks doing any heathen things. Told about an island east of Otaheite, where there was a lot of stone ruins older than anybody knew anything about, kind of like them on Penape in the Carolines, but with carvings of faces that looked like the big statues on Easter Island. It was a little volcanic island near there too, where there was there was a little volcanic island near there too, where there was other ruins with different carvings. Ruins all wore away like they'd been under the sea once, and with pictures of awful monsters all over them. Well, sir, Matt says he Matt, he says the natives around there had all the fish they could catch and sported bracelets and armlets and head rings made out of queer kind of gold and covered with pictures of monsters, just like the ones carved over the ruins on the little island. Sort of fish-like frogs or frog-like fishes that was all drawed in all kinds of positions like they was human beings. Nobody could get out of them where they got all the stuff. And all the other natives wondered how they managed to find fish in plenty, even when the very next islands had lean pickings. Matt, he got to wondering too, and so did Captain Obed. Obed, he notices, besides that, lots of the handsome young folks would drop up. What the fuck? Oh, right. Obed, he notices, besides that, lots of the handsome young folks would drop out of sight for good from year to year, and that they weren't as many old folks around. Also, he thinks some of the folks look darn queer even for Kanakies. It took Obed to get the truth out of them. Heathen. I don't know how he done it, but he begun by trading for the gold-like things they wore. I'm losing Shaw completely. Asked them where they come from, and if they could get more, and finally warm the story out of the old chief Wallachia, they called him. Nobody but Obed had ever believed the old yeller devil. But the captain could read folks like they was books. Heh. Nobody never believes me now when I tell them, and I don't suppose you will, young feller. They'll come to look at you. You've got kind of them sharp reading eyes like Obed had. The old man's whisper grew fainter, and I found myself shuddering at the terrible and sincere portentousness of his intonation, even though I knew his tale could be nothing but drunken fantasy. That is fantasy with a PH, fancy boys. I could not have picked a better night to somehow have unconnected the chat room to see any people. All right. Well, sir, Obed, he learned that there's things on this earth and that as most folks never heard about and wouldn't believe if they did hear. It seems these Kanakies was sacrificing heaps of their young men and maidens to some kind of god things that lived under the sea and getting all kinds of favor in return. They met the things on the little islet with the queer ruins, and it seems them awful pictures of frog-fish monsters was supposed to be pictures of these things. Maybe they was the kind of critters that's got all the mermaid stories started. The mermaid stories and such started. They had all kinds of cities on the sea bottom, and this island was heaved up from there. Seems there was some of the things alive in the stone buildings when the island come up sudden to the surface. That's how the Kanakies got wind they was down there. Made sign talk as soon as they got over being scared. and pieced up a bargain afore long. Them things liked human sacrifices, had 'em ages afore, but lost track of the upper world arter a time. What they done to the victims, it ain't for me to say, and I guess Obed wasn't none too sharp about asking. But it was all right with the heathens, because they'd been having a hard time and was desperate about everything. They gave a certain number of young folks to the sea things twice every year, May Eve and Halloween, regular as could be. Also give some of the carved knickknacks they made. What the things agreed to give in return was plenty of fish. They drove them in from all over the sea, and a few gold-like things now and then. Well, as it says, the natives met the things on a little volcanic islet, going there in canoes with the sacrifices, etc., and bringing back any of the gold-like jewels as was coming to them. At first, the things didn't never go on to the main island, but after a time they come to want to. Seems they hankered arter mixing with the folks and having giant ceremonies on the big days, May Eve and Halloween. You see, they was able to live both in and out of the water. What they call amphibians, I guess. The Kanakas told them as how folks from the other islands might want to wipe them out if they got wind of their being there. But they says they don't care much because they could wipe out the whole brood of humans if they was willing to bother. That is any as didn't have certain signs such as was used once by the lost old ones, whoever they was. But not wanting to bother, they'd lay low when anybody visited the island. When it come to mating with them toad-looking fishes, the Kanakas kind of balked. But finally they learned something has put a new face on the matter. Seems that human folks has got a kind of relation to such water beasts, that everything alive come out of the water once and only needs a little change to go back in. Them things told the Kanakas that if they mixed bloods, there'd be children as would look human at first, and later turn more and more like them things, till finally they'd take to the water and join the main lot of things down there. And this is the important part, young feller. Them as turned into fish things and went into the water would never die. Them things never died except they was killed violent. Well, sir, it seemed by the time Obed knowed them islanders they was all full of fish blood from them deep water things. When they got old and began to show it, they was kept hid until they felt like taking to the water and quitting the place. Some was more touched than others, and some never did change quite enough to take to the water. But mostly they turned out just the way them things said. Them as was born more like the things changed early, but them as was nearly human sometimes stayed on the island till they was past 70, though they'd usually go down under for trial trips afore that. Folks as had took to the water generally come back a good deal to visit, so as a man would often be talking to his own 5 times great-grandfather who'd left the dry land a couple 100 years or so afore. Everybody got out of the idea of dying, except in canoe wars with the other islanders or as sacrifices to the sea gods down below or from snakebite or plague or sharp galloping ailments or something before they could take to the water. But simply look forward to a kind of change that wasn't a bit horrible after a while. They thought what they got was well with all they had to give up. And I guess Obed kind of come to think the same himself when he'd chewed over old Wallachia story a bit. Wallachia, though, was one of the few as hadn't got none of the fish blood, being of a royal line that intermarried with royal lines on other islands. Wallachia, he showed Obed a lot of rites and incantations as had to do with the sea things, and let him see some of the folks in the villages had changed a lot from human shape. Somehow or another, though, he never would let him see one of them regular things from right out of the water. In the end, he'd give him a funny kind of thingamajig made out of lead or something that he said would bring up the fish things from any place in the water where there might be a nest of them. The idea was to drop it down with the right kind of prayers and such. Wallachia allowed as the things was scattered all over the world, so as anybody that looked about could find a nest and bring them up if they was wanted. Matt, he didn't like this business at all and wanted Obed should keep away from the island, but the captain was sharp for game and found he could get them gold-like things so cheap it'd pay him to make a specialty of them. Things went on that way for years, and Obed got enough of that gold-like stuff to make him start the refinery in Waite's old rundown fallen mill. He didn't dast sell the pieces like they was for folks to be all the time asking questions. All the same, his crews would get a piece and dispose of it now and then, even though they was swore to keep quiet, and he let his women folks wear some of the pieces as was more human-like than most. Well, I'll come about 38 when I was 7-year-old. Obed, he found the island people all wiped out between the villages. Seems the other islanders had got wind of what was going on and it took matters in their own hands. Suppose they must have had, after all, them old magic signs as the sea things says was the only things they was afeared of. No telling what any of them Kanaki's will chance to get hold of when the sea bottom throws up some island with ruins older than the deluge. Pious cusses these was. They didn't leave nothing standing on either the main island or the little volcanic islet, except what parts of the ruins was too big to knock down. In some places they was little stones strewn about, like charms, with some on them like what you call a swastika nowadays. Probably them was the old ones' signs. Folks all wiped out, no trace of no gold-like things, and none of the nearby Kanaki's would breathe a word about the matter. Wouldn't even admit there'd ever been any people on that island. That naturally hit Obed pretty hard, seeing as his normal trade was doing very poor. It hit the whole of Innsmouth, too, because in seafaring days, what profited the master of a ship generally profited the crew proportionate. Most of the folks around the town took the hard times kind of sheep-like and resigned, but they was in bad shape because the fishing was petering out and the mills wasn't doing too well either. Then's the time Obed. He began a cursing at the folks for being dull sheep and praying to a Christian heaven as didn't help him none. He told them he'd know that folks was prayed to gods that give something you really need, and says if a good bunch of men would stand by him, he could maybe get a hold of certain powers as would bring plenty of fish and quite a bit of gold. Of course, them as sarved on the Sumatry Queen and seed the island knowed what he meant, and wasn't none too anxious to get close to see things like they'd hear tell on. But them as didn't know what 'twas all about got kind of swayed by But them as didn't know what 'twas all about got kind of swayed by what Obed had to say and begun to ask him what he could do to set him on the way to the faith as would bring him results. See, there's a pragmatic village. This God fellow's not doing us any good. What does Cthulhu have? It took me a minute to pull Cthulhu. There's one person left. I hope it's my son. Here the old man faltered, mumbled, and lapsed into a moody and apprehensive silence, glancing nervously over his shoulder and then turning back to stare fascinatedly at the distant black reef. When I spoke to him, he did not answer, so I knew I would have to let him finish the bottle. The insane yarn I was hearing interested me profoundly, for I fancied there was contained within it a sort of crude allegory based upon the strangenesses of Innsmouth and elaborated by an imagination at once creative and full of scraps of exotic legend. Not for a moment did I believe that the tale had any real substantial foundation, but nonetheless the account held a hint of genuine terror, if only because it brought in references to strange jewels clearly akin to the malign tiara I had seen at Newburyport. Perhaps the ornaments had, after all, come from some strange island, and possibly the wild stories were lies of the bygone Obed himself rather than of this antique toper. I handed Zadok the bottle, and he drained it to the last drop. It was curious how he could stand so much whiskey, for not even a trace of thickness had come into his high, wheezy voice. He licked the nose of the bottle and slipped it into his pocket, then beginning to nod and whisper softly to himself. I bent close to catch any articulate words he might utter, and thought I saw a sardonic smile behind the stained bushy whiskers. Yes, he was really forming words, and I could grasp a fair proportion of them. Oh, good. Poor Matt. Matt, he always was again it. Tried to line up the folks on his side and had long talks with the preachers. No use. They run the congregational parson out of town, and the Methodist feller quit. Never did see Resolve Babcock, the Baptist parson, again. But I heard what I heard. Wrath of Jehovah. I was a mighty little critter, but I heard what I heard, and I seen what I seen. Dagon and Ashtoreth, Belial and Beelzebub, golden calf and the idols of Canaan and the Philistines, Babylonish abominations, many Tekel Upharsin. I don't know if that's. He stopped again, and from the look in his watery blue eyes, I feared he was close to a stupor after all. But when I gently shook his shoulder, he turned on me with astonishing alertness and snapped out some more obscure phrases. Don't believe me, hey? Then just tell me, young fella, why Captain Obed and 20-odd other folks used to row out to Devil Reef in the dead of night and chant things so loud you could hear them all over town when the wind was right. Tell me that, hey? And tell me why Obed was always dropping heavy things down to the deep water to the other side of the reef or the bottom shoots down like a cliff, lower than you can sound. Tell me what he done with that funny shaped lead thingamajig as Wallachia give him. Hey, boy? And what did they all howl on May Eve and again on the next Halloween? And why the new church parsons fellas as used to be sailors wear them queer robes and cover themselves with them gold-like things Obed brung, hey? The watery blue eyes were almost savage and maniacal now, and the dirty white beard bristled electrically. Old Zadok probably saw me shrink back, for he had begun to cackle evilly. Beginning to see, hey? Maybe it'd like to have been me in them days when I see things at night out to sea from the cupola on top of my house. Oh, I can tell ye. Little pitchers have big ears, and I wasn't missing nothing of what was gossiped about Captain Obed and the folks out to the reef. How about the night I took my pa's ship's glass up to the cupola and seed the reef a bristling, thick with shapes that dove off quick soon as the moon riz. Obed and the folks was in a dory, but them shapes dove off the far side into the deep water and never come up. How'd you like to be a little shaver alone up in a cupola a watching shapes as one human shapes? Hey? The old man was getting hysterical, and I began to shiver with a nameless alarm. He laid a gnarled claw on my shoulder, and it seemed to me that its shaking was not altogether that of mirth. Very sharp. Suppose one night you seed something heavy heaved off in Obed's dory beyond the reef, and then larn the next day a young feller was missing from home, eh? Did anybody ever see hide or hair of Hiram Gilman again? Did they? And Nick Pierce and Llewellyn Waite and Adam Adoniram Southwick, his first name was unpronounceable, and Henry Garrison, hey? Shapes talking, sign language with their hands, them as had real hands. Well, sir, that was the time Obed began to get on his feet again. Excuse me. Folks see his three darters wearing gold-like things as nobody had ever seen on them before, and smoke started coming out of the refinery chimbley. Other folks was prospering too. Fish begun to swarm in the harbor fit to kill, and heaven knows what size cargoes would begun to ship out to Newburyport, Arkham, and Boston. 'Twas then Obed got the old branch railroad put through. Some Kingsport fishermen heard about the catch and come up in sloops, but they was all lost. Nobody never see him again. And just then our folks organized the esoteric Order of Dagon and bought Masonic Hall off in Cavalry Commandery for it. Matt Elliott was a Mason, and again the selling, but he dropped out of sight just then. Remember, I ain't saying Obed was set on having things just like they was out on that Kanaki Isle. I don't think he aimed at first to do no mixing, nor raise no youngins to take to the water and turn into fishes with eternal life. He wanted them gold things and was willing to pay heavy, and I guess the others was satisfied for a while. Come in 46, the town done some looking and thinking for itself. Too many folks missing, too much wild preaching and meeting of a Sunday. Too much talk about that reef. I guess I'd done a bit by telling Slickman Mowry what I see from the cupola. There was a party one night as followed Obed's crowd out to the reef, and I heard shots betwixt the dories. Next day, Obed and 32 others was in jail, with everybody a-wondering just what was afoot and just what charge again him could be got to hold. God, if anybody'd look ahead, a couple of weeks later when nothing had been thrown into the sea for that long. Zadok was showing signs of fright and exhaustion, and I let him keep silence for a while, though glancing apprehensively at my watch. The tide had turned and was coming in now, and the sound of the waves seemed to arouse him. I was glad of that tide, for at high water the fishy smell might not be so bad. Again I strained to catch his whispers. That awful night, I seed 'em. I was up in the cupola, hordes of 'em, swarms of 'em, all over the reef and swimming up the harbor into the Monooksett. God, what happened in the streets of Innsmouth that night? They rattled our door, but Pa wouldn't open. Then he clumb out the kitchen window with his musket to find Selectman Mowry and see what he could do. Mounds of the dead and the dying, shots and screams, shouting the old squar and town squar and New Church Green, jail throwed open, proclamation, treason. Called it the plague when folks come in and found half our people missing. What an asshole. Called it the plague when the folks come in and found half our people missing. Nobody left but them as a join in with Obed and them. Nobody left but them as a join in with Obed and them things, or else keep quiet. Never hear to my pa no more. The old man was panting and perspiring profusely. He's probably pissed because a fucking motorcycle keeps driving by. His grip on my shoulder tightened. Sorry. Shouldn't broadcast from the noisiest street in the world. Everything cleaned up in the morning, but they was traces. Obed, he kind of takes charge and says things is going to be changed. Others will worship with us at meeting time, and certain houses has got to entertain guests. They wanted to mix like they'd done with the Kanaki's, and he, for one, didn't feel bound to stop them. Far gone was Obed, just like a crazy man on the subject. He says they brung us fish and treasure and should have what they hankered after. Nothing was to be different around the outside, only we was to keep shy of strangers if we knowed what was good for us. We all had to take the oath of the Dagon, and later on they was second and third oaths that some on us took. Them as would help special would get special rewards, gold and such. No use balking, for there was millions of them down there. They'd rather not start rising and wiping out mankind, but if they was gave away and forced to, they could do a lot toward just that. We didn't have them old charns to cut off like folks in the South Sea did, and them Kanaki's wouldn't never give away their secrets. Yield up enough sacrifices and savage knickknacks and harborages in the town when they wanted it. Yield up enough sacrifices and savage knickknacks and harborage in the town when they wanted it, and they'd let well enough alone. Wouldn't bother no strangers as might bear tails outside, that is, without they got prying. All in the band of the faithful, order a Dagon, and the children should never die, but go back to the mother Hydra and father Dagon, where we all come from once. And then there's a bunch of Riley language that I don't know. You know, the unpronounceable Lovecraft language. Old Zadok was fast lasping into stark raving, and I held my breath. Poor old soul. To what pitiful depths of hallucination had his liquor, plus his hatred of the decay, alienage, and disease around him, brought that fertile, imaginative brain? He began to moan now, and tears were coursing down his channeled cheeks into the depths of his beard. God, what I seen since I was 15-year-old. Many tekel of Harson. I don't know what that fuck that means. The folks was missing, and them has killed theirselves. Them has told things in Arkham or Ipswich or such places was all called crazy, like you're a-calling me right now. But God, what I seen. They'd have killed me long ago for what I know, only I took the first and second oaths of Dagonoff and Obed, so was protected unless in a jury of them proved I told things known and deliberate. But I wouldn't take the third oath. I'd have died rather than take that. It was around Civil War time when children born since 46 begun to grow up, some of them, that is. I was afeared. Never did no prying after that awful night, and never seen one of them close to in all my life. That is, never no full-blooded one. I went to the war, and if I had any guts or sense, I'd have never come back, but settled away from here. But folks wrote me things wasn't so bad. That, I suppose, was because government draftman was in town after 63. After the war, it was just as bad again. People begun to fall off. Mills and shops shut down. Shipping stopped, and the harbor choked up. Railroad give up, but they never stopped swimming in and out of the river from that cursed reef of Satan. And more attic windows got boarded up, and more noises was heard in houses that wasn't supposed to have nobody in them. Folks outside have their stories about us. Suppose you've heard plenty on them, seeing what questions you asked. Stories about things they've seen now and then, and about that queer jewelry that still comes in from somewheres and ain't quite all melted up. But nothing never gets definite. Nobody will believe nothing. They call them gold-like things pirate loot, and allow the Innsmouth folks has firm blood or is distempered or something. Besides, them that lives here shoo off as many strangers as they can, and encourage the rest not to get very curious, especially around that time. Beasts balk at the critters, hosses, wuss, and mules. But when they got autos, that was all right. We already covered that before. In 46, Captain Obed took a second wife that nobody in the town never seen. Some says he didn't want to, but was made to by them as he'd called in. Had 3 children by her. 2 has disappeared young, but one gal has looked like anybody else and was educated in Europe. Obed finally got her married off by a trick to an Arkham fella that didn't suspect nothing. But nobody outside'll have nothing to do with Innsmouth folks now. Barnabas Marsh, that runs the refinery now, is Obed's grandson by his first wife, son of Onesphorus, his eldest son, but his mother was another of them, and wasn't never seed outdoors. Right now, Barnabas is about changed. Can't shut his eyes no more and is all out of shape. They say he still wears clothes, but he'll take to the water soon. Maybe he's tried it already. They do sometimes go down for little spells before they go for good. Ain't been seen about in public for nigh on 10 year. Doesn't know how his poor wife can feel. She come from Ipswich, and they nigh lynched Barnabas when he courted her 50-odd year ago. Obed, he died in 78, and all the next generation is gone now. The first wife's children dead, and the rest, God knows. The sound of the incoming tide was now very insistent, and little by little it seemed to change the old man's mood from maudlin tearfulness to watchful fear. He would pause now and then to renew those nervous glances over his shoulder or out toward the reef, and despite the wild absurdity of his tale, I could not help beginning to share his vague apprehensiveness. Zadok now grew shriller and seemed to be trying to whip up his courage with louder speech. Hey, you, why don't you say something? How'd you like to be living in the town like this with everything a rotting and a dying and boarded up monsters crawling and bleeding and barking and hopping around, black cellars and attics everywhere you turn? Hey, how'd you like to hear the howling night after night from the churches and order a Dagon Hall and know what's doing part of the howling? How'd you like to hear what comes from that awful reef every May Eve and Halloween or Hallowmass? Hey? Think the old man's crazy, eh? Well, sir, let me tell you, that ain't the worst. Zadok was really screaming now, and the mad frenzy of his voice disturbed me more than I care to own. Kersey, don't you see thar staring at me with them eyes? I tell Obed Mark he's in hell, and he's got to stay thar. Heh, in hell, I says. Can't get me, I ain't done nothing nor told nobody nothing. Oh, you young feller. Well, even if I ain't told nobody nothing yet, I'm a-going to now. You just sit still and listen to me, boy. This is what I ain't never told nobody. I says I didn't do no prying after that night, but I found things out just the same. You want to know what the real horror is, eh? Well, it's this. It ain't what them fish devils has done, but what they're a-going to do. They're a-bringing things up out of where they come from, into the town. What? Been doing it for years and slackening up lately. Them houses north of the river betwixt water and main streets is full of them, them devils and what they brung. And when they get ready, I say when they get ready, ever hear Shoggoth? Hey, did you hear me? I tell you, I know what them things be. I seen him one night when, and then he screams. The hideous suddenness and inhuman frightfulness of the old man's shriek almost made me faint. His eyes, looking past me toward the malodorous sea, were positively starting from his head, while his face was a mask of fear worthy of Greek tragedy. His bony claw dug monstrously into my shoulder, and he made no motion as I turned my head to look at whatever he had glimpsed. There was nothing that I could see, only the incoming tide, with perhaps one set of ripples more local than the long-flung line of breakers. But now Zadok was shaking me, and I turned back to watch the melting of that fear-frozen face into a chaos of twitching eyelids and mumbling gums. Presently his voice came back, albeit as a trembling whisper. Get out of here, get out of here. They seen us, get out for your life. Don't wait for nothing, they know now, run for it, quick, out of this town. Another heavy wave dashed against the loosening masonry of the bygone wharf and changed the mad ancient's whisper to another inhuman and blood-curdling scream. Before I could recover my scattered wits, he had relaxed his clutch on my shoulder and dashed wildly inland toward the street, reeling northward around the ruined warehouse wall. I glanced back at the sea, but there was nothing there. And when I reached Water Street and looked along it toward the north, there was no remaining trace of Zadok Allen. Okay, fun times with that voice. All right, there's 2 chapters left. So next week, that's what we'll do, and then we'll move on to something else. Thanks for stopping by then. Have a nice night. Don't have sex with any fish people if you can avoid it.